Look at life starting at intention. And what I mean by that is that when my wife and I decided to have children, even before that, when I decided to have a wife, I said there are things that are going to kind of rule you in or rule you out as my future bride. And one of them was, well, for me personally, I knew that vaccination was not going to happen with my kids. So if you wanted to partner up with me as a parent, then that was sort of one of the things. And I have 30,000 pages of stuff that I've read over the last 20 years and looked at both sides of the issue and made my decision and said, but in order for me to actually carry that out and have a happy relationship, that's an agreement that we need to have. So I wanted to make sure that I picked someone who had that value, who had the value of it's not okay to put foods into myself even before we were going to have children that were going to create less than healthy cells, because I knew that I only had one cell that was going to represent me that was going to create this child. Does that make sense? So I literally spent 3 years prior to conceiving a child on eating right and exercising and detoxing and doing whatever I could so that when I had a kid, that child would have the best of me. Does that make sense? And my wife did the same thing. Now, for a lot of us, that's too late. We can't go back in time, 40, 50 years and have our parents, detox and do that. We've got to make the best of what we can. And even for our children, if they're, a few months old, we can only do what we have with them so far. But here's the good news. If they're 6 months old, then they can do a whole lot better than we can when we're in our 30s and 40s, and we have to undo. Literally, most of my patients are obviously older than 6 months, so we're going to have to literally undo years and years of damage that have been done from bad lifestyle. So when it comes to kids, the way that they respond is amazing. We've had kids who've had literally a couple of adjustments and their asthma's gone away. A couple of adjustments and ADD turns around. And it's not like I have the ADD adjustment, it's because their brain is able to communicate with their body better. Does that make sense? And so I'm not going to even claim to heal anybody in my office. I haven't healed a single person except for myself in my office because I know where that power comes from. And so we'll talk about that power tonight too. So we're living in a situation right now where kids actually have, for the first time in our nation's history, a shorter life expectancy than their parents. I want that to sit on you for a second. Because we have more technology. We take literally 75% of the world's medications are taken by 5% of the world's population. So it's not a lack of doctors, it's not a lack of hospitals, it's not a lack of opportunity to get well. Everybody wants to be healthy, right? Everybody here wants to be healthy. You wouldn't be here if you wouldn't be healthy. But even more than that, everybody wants their children to be better off than they were. But for the first time in our nation's history, we've got a situation where the opposite is happening. Heart disease is way up. With kids, I'm not even sure if you guys know this, heart disease in kids. You wouldn't think about heart disease in kids. Yet, we'll go into some studies tonight which will shock you about how prevalent that's happening. Obesity has gone up dramatically in even the last 20 years. Type 2 diabetes actually isn't even referred to as adult onset diabetes anymore because so many kids are getting it. So, what do we do? If you look at all of the childhood diseases, like things like autism and ADD and asthma and just a lot of the chronic gastrointestinal problems, worse and worse. And I don't want to just shove all of this negative stuff on you, but the truth is, almost all of it is preventable with a healthy lifestyle. So that's the good news. Everybody with me? All right, so we're going to get into the good stuff here. Actually, no, a couple more digs first. So in heart conditions, 200 kids in this study that were autopsied, kids who had some kind of traumatic event, died in car accidents, that sort of thing. And by their mid-20s, 70% had significant plaquing of their arteries. Can you feel heart disease building up? Can you feel cancer building up? Not until what? Not until it's too late. All right? So we have the opportunity younger, and this is from the New England Journal of Medicine. So what is the model of this country generally? Is it generally a preventative model or a reactive treatment model? Reactive treatment. And so what does our healthcare model say about so many kids with plaquing in their arteries and high cholesterol levels? What's the opportunity there?
More medicine.
More cholesterol drugs. Now, there is an organ in your body that controls every other organ, and it is made up of fat. And we're talking about what part of your body? Your brain. So a disaster, according to many doctors, is about to hit when kids as young as 8 years old are going to be put on cholesterol-lowering medications. Because what this does is cross the blood-brain barrier. It affects what's called the glial cells of the brain, which are responsible for memory or cognition. Now, I know that thinking about heart disease in children might have been foreign to a lot of you, but how about this, Alzheimer's? When does Alzheimer's start? It starts now, is the answer. It doesn't start when you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Slow and steady loses the race in that case. Does that make sense? So if you have a little bit, and then a little bit, and then a little bit, and one of the things they've actually shown, it causes increase in dementia and possibilities for Alzheimer's, especially when treated young. Okay, so be very careful. Don't be fooled into giving cholesterol drugs, especially since cholesterol is never the problem. How many of you think that cholesterol causes heart disease? I just want to kind of get a hand on this. How many people? It's okay. I mean, everyone's trained to think that. Every fourth commercial on television is a drug ad telling you, ask your doctor if this is right for you, or if diet and exercise don't work, then take this drug. And we do, but it's important to understand what cholesterol is actually doing. Okay, cholesterol is your body's natural anti-inflammatory that's made in the liver. And its job is to seek out inflammation that's created usually through lifestyle and to protect the arteries so that your body has actually not as much nicking and scratching from toxins. Now, of course, it's sort of like if a fire is being lit on your street by a pyromaniac and he keeps on lighting fires. And then the firefighters are called in which is the cholesterol, to put out the fires. Now, what's going to happen to your street? What's going to happen to the traffic on your street? It's going to get what? It's going to get clogged up. So should the answer be to take something that kills all firefighters? Of course not. Right? So what would the answer be? Find the pyro and take them out. So the pyro in this case is oftentimes lifestyle. It's usually chemical stress, referred to as toxicity, or deficiency. And we'll refer to that as we go through some of the advanced plan tricks, because one of the biggest sources of stress to your arterial walls is just something that some people consider nutrition, but it's actually an anti-nutrient. Okay. So what are we doing in this country? Well, your cells need food, water, air, and life. If you take medications, and again, this is not a bragging thing, but there's a reason why my kids who are 9 and 6 have never been on a medication, have never missed a day. Actually, my older daughter's missed one day of school. If you understand what health is, health doesn't come from a pill, from a shot, from a lotion, from a salve, from an ointment, or from anything outside in. Now, I'm not saying this is not against medicine, this is not against doctors or nurses or anything else, but our whole system is set up to overprescribe. The benefit is that drug companies make money when people are sick, so the incentive's not really to keep people well. When talking about a $2.7 trillion industry, we want to understand that, unfortunately, if this was the answer to getting people well, then the world taking by far the world's most medications would be the world's what? Healthiest. And are we? Not even a little bit. Okay? In fact, the World Health Organization ranked us anywhere from last to second to last in about 6 out of the 7 top factors what creates a healthy nation. So right now, 25% of children are on a chronic medication. 25%. Okay? That's not okay with me. So again, I was wrong. It's not 46 doses of vaccines. It's 49 doses of 14 vaccines before the age of 6. And so here's some of the ingredients in there. Obviously, the virus itself, which is changed a little bit. And then they put either aluminum or mercury. It used to be mercury, but now they changed a lot of it because there was a mercury scare. So they changed a lot of it to aluminum. Then you have formaldehyde, and then phenoxyl ethanol, glutaldehyde, sodium borate, and we can go through NMSG and sorts of other fun things. How many of you would just, if I made a drink of that, would just like suck it down? Anybody? No. And so if we inject that into our children, and again, not necessarily, one and then like 6 months later another one, and then it's the toxic burden now has grown because if you look at our environment in general, with all the different phthalates and plastics and PBCs and PBAs and all the other things that we dump into our water and our air supply and everything else that we're doing, it's just another thing that a little immune system has a really hard time dealing with. All right, so you've heard when you're on an airplane that if we go down and the air mask drops, who do you put it on first? You take care of yourself so that you can take care of your kids. Because the reality is, they're going to do what you do. They're going to learn. You ever seen that commercial of the little kid who's, just, and he says, and the dad says, well, where'd you learn that? He goes, I learned it from you, Dad. But they're watching you. So if you're not exercising, guess what? They're not. How many of you, when you were a kid, you exercised more than kids do today? I hope so, because when I was a kid, I got home from school, and what'd you do? You went outside and you played. You got on your bike and you went over jumps and you got scarred up and you did, and you walked through the woods, whatever it was. Today, kids go home and they're on their computer or their Xbox or whatever, or they're watching television, on average 2.5 hours a day right now. 2.5 hours a day. You add that up over the course of a lifetime, that's a lot of time spent being plugged in to something that's not you. Okay? So we're going to talk about first taking care of yourself if you want to change your kids. So we've actually had, again, even more things, record levels of hormone-induced disease. And we'll talk about hormones tonight. And what they're saying is right now, disease care costs $1 out of $6 in this country, but it's escalating at a rate of about, it's doubling every 10 years now. So they're estimating in about 20 to 25 years, we won't have any money left publicly to afford to, as the baby boomers go through their most expensive times, because the number one cause of bankruptcy in this country is medical bills. You guys know that? And the number one recipient of retirement dollars is nursing homes. So what do? We save our money and invest it in things like a healthy lifestyle so we don't get sick in the first place. And most of you are young enough so that you have the chance to escape the nursing home, and on average for a 65-year-old, on average of 6 medications in this country. So, we definitely want to do that for our kids. So if you want to not have unhealthy adults, you have to change it at the kid level. All right, so all of that, bad news. Here's the solution. There's not one of the top things that are killing most Americans and affecting most children that the 5 essentials doesn't handle. And they go in terms of the order of importance. It starts with maximizing your what? Your mind. Because if you don't think differently than the average person, you get the same results that the average person gets. So we're talking a lot about that tonight. If and just to give you a couple of examples. In terms of max mind, we want to teach our parents that fevers are not unhealthy. Okay? That's just one thing I want you to go with, because a lot of people get scared into thinking, oh, my child has a fever. Well, what do? Well, the reality is it takes 101.5 fever to kill viral infections, 103.5 to kill off bacterial infections, because that's your body's internal way of taking your immune system, saying, okay, there's the invader. It will do what it has to do to burn it off and then go back down. Now, where's the exception in there? Where would it not realize that the temperature, that the virus or the bacteria is dead? We'll talk about this just because of you, Dot. So the internal register for thermoregulation, or sort of like the thermostat inside your body, is right up there at the brainstem level. And its job is to regulate the temperature of the body relative to what its needs are. So if that's working properly, then once it does its job, it will do what? It'll come back down. But what if the actual thermoregulating system itself is either toxified or has physical pressure on it? Then it's not going to do its thing properly, and it could keep on going up and up and up, and it's just like pressure building up in a valve. Say it's going to, where's that steam going to go at some point? Well, if you have a pressure relief system, what will happen is your body will actually do what's called a a febrile seizure. And it was a quick way to bring that temperature down. And people are afraid that the febrile seizures are actually going to cause brain damage. Just to let you know, they've been studying this since the 70s. And not one case of febrile seizure has actually caused death. So, but again, it's a very scary thing, and fear is easy to prey upon. So just to give someone something here, just take this to bring that fever down. So if I gave something to bring a fever down, now what's still going on inside the body? Either the virus or the bacteria. So do you want that stuff out or in? Out. So what are some other ways that a healthy, functioning body gets rid of viruses and bacteria? Okay, sneezing, coughing, throwing up, diarrhea, fun stuff to talk about on a Monday night. But that's a healthy body. That's the immune system at work. Does that make sense? That's your body trying to do its job. We don't want to repress symptoms. We want to figure out what the body is trying to do with its own intelligence. Okay? In addition to that, we have maximized nerve supply, giving the body what it needs in terms of food, water, air, and of course life, and removing what it doesn't need in terms of minimizing toxicity. So it all begins in your mind. Just like we just talked about with that one example, if the germ theory were 100% right, there would be nobody left on Earth to believe it. Just put it that way. It's only half right. It's not only about the strength of the virus or the bacteria, but it's also about the strength of what? The internal resistance. It's a battle going on all the time. So there are 3 lines of defense in your immune system. The first line of defense is your skin. Okay, everyone know that? It's your largest organ that you have. It has antibacterial properties on it, little probiotics that live there. And one of the worst things that you could do to your skin as far as your immune system goes is use antibacterial soap. Because what you're doing is actually killing your natural defense mechanism on the outside. So if your body can't then stop it there, where can it go? In. Or if it doesn't go in that way, the average person touches their face a couple of thousand times a day. Just little things here and there. So where's the next place that a bacteria or virus could enter in? The buccal membrane, nose and mouth, right? And so the second line of defense, this amazing thing that you have, your body has, is in your buccal membrane you have your adenoids and your tonsils, right? And you have all those things in there, and a little disease-fighting stuff going on in there. But if they're constantly fighting infections, we've been told to cut them out at some point. Now people aren't doing that as much, but that's sort of like, if I do this and my skin gets red, oh, my skin's getting red. It's just getting inflamed. I should just cut that off. Now it won't get red anymore. And no harm, against Angelina Jolie, but just the possibility that she could have gotten, a breast cancer, and she does a double mastectomy prophylactically. And I was saying to my wife in jest, I'm sorry, kids, I'm glad that she didn't have a family history of hemorrhoids. She would have had to amputate something else. But it just. We know that she didn't have a family history of, she might have had a family history of brain cancer too, because it looks like she had that taken out at some point. So the reality is, whether you think you can or you can't do something, you're right. Beliefs are given life. Beliefs are alive and living things inside of you through your values, expectations, experience, and your internal state or your emotional state. And we're going to take a look at this, and one example I'm going to give is that of Roger Bannister. How many of you guys know who Roger Bannister is? He's the first guy who did what?
Ran the mile in 4 minutes, right?
Perfect. So 1954, Roger Bannister did the unthinkable, which is ran the 4-minute mile. And everyone has been trying to do that at that point for forever. They tried and they failed, they tried and they failed, and they tried and they failed. So based upon their beliefs, what did most people think about running the 4-minute mile? It wasn't possible. In fact, they had scientists who came up there and said, based upon human physiology, based upon blah, 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 it is literally impossible for people, for human beings to run a 4-minute mile. And they showed you all the research behind that. Well, Roger, who went to the Olympics in 1952, he didn't win there. He kind of failed at it, and he said, what, I'm gonna run the 4-minute mile. And everyone laughed at him, but he had this internal belief system that he said, I've seen it. I already know that I can. And he claimed it over and over again, and he drove. With that belief, he had a value. Well, that guy can ride a bike. You can do that with too. It's like if you're on a bike. But his value was that if I can't do this then like the world's going to come to an end. He had such a negative emotion about failing in this again, just totally like it was going to kill him. Like if he couldn't do it, and if he did do it, the pleasure associated, well, he would actually change the way people think about running and the style of running, and he would change the world forever about what's possible. So he had huge pain and pleasure values associated with what was his belief system. Does that make sense? So everything that you've been told when it comes to health pretty much has been a lie over the course of your entire life. And so in order to pull you out of the matrix of sort of being sucked at the medical teat, we've got to get you in terms of what your belief systems are to change. And you've got to be able to understand that literally right now, our number one cause of death in this country is our healthcare system. So I want you to have a value of saying, not me and not my kids and not our family. And so we will do what we can to make sure that we have a maximized life. So you have to associate positive values and beliefs, and then also create the pain too, because unfortunately most people aren't motivated as much by pleasure. People will do more to prevent losing what they have than to get something new. Do you guys know that? So when talking about the carrot and the stick, you've got to create both. What's your goal? What's your pleasure associated when you get that goal? But what's your pain emotionally if you don't reach what you're looking for? All right. After that, expectations. If the belief in this case is I can't ride a bike, then your values are, well, it's too much time, or it's too much effort, or the expectations are, you know what, I'm just going to fall again based upon my experiences. And then how do you feel about riding a bike if you fall and you every time you've gone on a bike you just had a really bad experience? What's going to be your emotions associated with bike riding? Fear, or just like, I don't want to do that, or that's not fun, or other things. So then it's going to reinforce your values. Does that make sense? And what's called an internal state that's self-driven. And when the same thing happens, whether it's a downward spiral or an upward spiral. So the good news is that, so I'll fail again and again. When I fall down, I get hurt, I get frustrated and defeated, and I'm not going to have any more pain. So you stay away from it. But Roger Bannister, again, had this belief system that he could. And at one point, he was at 402, and then 401, and then he couldn't break it for another 6 months. He tried and he failed. He tried and he failed. Did he quit? No. In fact, so the day that he broke it, the papers around the world buzzed wild. He had 359, and no one had ever done that before. But here's the cool thing. Within 2 years of Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile, 48 other people did it. Never been done before. All of a sudden, everyone says what? Wow, I can do this. So now they change their values. Maybe I can break the 4-minute mile. My expectation is that if he did it, then I can do it. And then they did it better and better and better, and boom, all of a sudden they created pleasure associated with the new belief system. So before we even get into like the what tonight, we've got to get into your why. Your why matters so much more than your what, because I'll tell you this, every single person in this room knows that nutrition matters when it comes to your health, right? How many of you who just said yes to that feel like you can do a little bit better when it comes to nutrition? Everyone here believes that exercise is important. Yet how many of you think that you can do better with your exercise? And so the reality is, it's not a matter of the what. It's not the intellectual knowledge that's going to change the planet. What's going to change the planet is when enough people say, you know what, not me and not my family headed in that model. I want something different. And in order, because if I go in that model, I'm going to get the same thing that everyone else has gotten. So I need to change my model. So if you say, I'm not going to wake up in the morning to exercise because I'm not a morning person, change that limiting belief is, you know what, in order for me to achieve everything I want in my life, I need that energy, so I'll be able to achieve so much more in just 10, 12 minutes a day. You guys all know about our exercise program. It takes 12 minutes a day. How many of you feel like you have 12 minutes a day that you could exercise? How many of you just don't raise your hands for anything or lying to me? All right, so we can all do that. You know what? Instead of saying, again, like if your kids are sneezing and coughing and that sort of thing, instead of saying, oh, my kids are always sick, oh, my kids are expressing health again. But even better, what can I do to make sure that I'm reinforcing their immune system? So again, instead of covering up the pores on your skin or killing the good bacteria there, or the third line of defense I didn't even go into is in your gut, where 80% of your immune system lives. 80%. So how important is it that we grow kids with healthy immune systems? So important. And one of the best ways to kill the good bacteria in your gut. How do you kill bacteria? Antibiotics. So did you guys know that the Center for Disease Control has issued a warning continuously for the past dozen years now that on our top 5 watch list is the overuse of antibiotics. Because antibiotics don't just kill the bacteria that we want to kill, they kill what? Everything, the good bacteria too. And if you kill the good bacteria, does it take them days or weeks to come back, or months? Months, even years, if at all. And in order to actually even promote good bacteria growing in your stomach, it's like having a garden. If you sprayed something that would kill the weeds, but also kill the vegetables, and then do the vegetables just grow back overnight? No, you gotta scrap those veggies, and you gotta take the soil in order to make it fertile again. So you gotta plant some things. In this case, we call them either prebiotics or sort of like fertilizer, even and probiotics. A macrobiotic diet, that's fermented foods, miso. There's lots of things you can put in there. Yogurt can help if it's the right kind. So we really want to start to grow that stuff again. But you guys know where 90% of antibiotics come from these days? It's not even from our doctor's offices. It's from our foods. It's from our dairy. It's from our meat. We're supposed to be aware of what our kids are putting into their body. Because coughing, sneezing, again, getting that stuff out. That's good. All right. So it's just genetic. Mom's overweight, so I'm overweight. You know what? The reality is, if you took a look at my family, my mom, my dad, my sister. You're not recording this, Ron, right? You would know that it's not just about genetics. If I went to my natural tendencies, I would be obese, like morbidly obese. If you looked at my mom, dad, and sister, they are all just huge, and that's just because they don't work out as hard or eat as right as they need to. Just based upon our genetics, we need to eat cleaner and work out harder than the average person does. Some people can look like this, and eat anything. That doesn't necessarily make them healthier. You guys get that? That actually fat is your body's way of protecting you, your internal organs, against toxicity. So sometimes people who are skinnier get cancer first. So it's not necessarily a healthy thing. But would you rather be fit and healthy? Yes, absolutely. You'd rather be fit and healthy because if you go to the cancer ward or the heart ward, there's skinny people there too. It's not about being skinny. Instead of saying, oh, my kid has ADD, I just can't do anything, has to be on the Ritalin or the Adderall, you can actually change the things that created it. We'll go into ADD a little bit tonight, but just to let you know, those kids aren't overactive in their brains. They're actually underactive here. It's weird to think about this, but their brains are actually depressed. Do you guys know that? If someone is overactive up here, why would you give someone something that's actually a Schedule II methamphetamine, which is similar to cocaine in the brain? Do you give cocaine to somebody who's already overactive in the brain? No. And so why are their brains depressed in the first place? So in order for their brain to feel normal, you actually have to stimulate it. Does that make sense? What they're doing when they're moving around and kinesthetic and visual and auditory, they're trying to stimulate their brain so that they feel normal. Does that make sense? And so what the Ritalin does and the Adderall does to help